Ramsay Bolton, a name that invokes fear, disgust, and fascination. His acts of cruelty are infamous, but what drives a man to such depths of depravity? Today, we dive into the twisted mind of Ramsay Bolton, not merely to recount his horrific actions, but to understand the psychological forces behind them. What does his evil represent in the broader context of A Song of Ice and Fire? How does power, trauma, and a warped sense of identity fuel Ramsay's descent into darkness? Let's unravel the layers of his character, exploring the moments that define his journey into one of the most chilling figures in George R.R. Martin's world. Section 1. The Making of Ramsay. Before we dissect Ramsay's actions, we must first examine his origins. Born the illegitimate son of Ramsay Bolton, Ramsay's life begins in the shadow of rejection. His mother, a miller's wife raped by Ramsay, instills in him a deep hatred for the world. This early trauma shapes Ramsay's worldview. He is unwanted, unloved, and deeply insecure about his place in the world. Illegitimacy in Westeros is more than a social stain. It is a life sentence of marginalization. From the start, Ramsay is conditioned to believe that cruelty is the only way to seize power and respect. His father's eventual acknowledgement of him as his son comes not from love, but from necessity. Roose recognizes Ramsay's potential for ruthless cunning, but never shows him genuine affection. This paternal coldness further entrenches Ramsay's belief that power is won through fear, manipulation, and brutality. Ramsay's internal conflict, his desperate need for validation, coupled with his father's apathy, fuels his desire to prove himself worthy of the Bolton name, no matter the cost. Section 2. The Psychology of Cruelty. Ramsay's cruelty is not random. It's a calculated method of asserting control. Like many abusers, Ramsay's need to dominate stems from his own feelings of powerlessness. His sadism is a response to his own insecurities, his desperate need to make others feel as helpless as he once did. Throughout the books, we see Ramsay revel in the suffering of others, deriving pleasure from the torment he inflicts. This cruelty is more than a personal preference. It's his way of asserting dominance in a world that has tried to cast him aside. One of the most notable examples is his treatment of Theon Greyjoy. Ramsay's psychological and physical torture of Theon is not just an act of cruelty, but a deliberate attempt to strip Theon of his identity. In rebranding Theon as Reek, Ramsay erases every trace of Theon's former self. This act of domination is a reflection of Ramsay's own inner turmoil. By reducing Theon to nothing, Ramsay asserts his own fractured sense of self-worth. Section 3. The Reek Dynamic. Theon's transformation into Reek is one of the most harrowing arcs in A Song of Ice and Fire, and it serves as a key to understanding Ramsay's psyche. Ramsay's power over Theon is not just physical, it is psychological warfare. He dehumanizes Theon through repeated humiliation, forcing him to adopt a new identity. In many ways, Ramsay's treatment of Theon mirrors the cruelty Ramsay himself experienced as a bastard, always feeling lesser, always trying to prove his worth. By turning Theon into Reek, Ramsay creates a mirror of his own broken psyche. He forces Theon to confront the same feelings of worthlessness and identity loss that have plagued him his entire life. But unlike Ramsay, who embraces his cruelty, Theon ultimately tries to reclaim his identity. This dynamic highlights Ramsay's inability to face his own insecurities. He externalizes them onto others, ensuring they suffer as he once did. Section 4. The Pursuit of Power. Power, for Ramsay, is not a means to an end, it is the end itself. His obsession with control drives him to commit increasingly brutal acts, each more horrific than the last. The flaying of his enemies, the sadistic hunts, and the cold-blooded murders all serve one purpose: to assert dominance over those who would deny him power. Ramsay's need for power is rooted in his upbringing. Having been born a bastard, he feels the constant need to prove his legitimacy, not just to others but to himself. One key moment that exemplifies this is when Ramsay marries Arya Stark, who is actually Jane Poole. Through this marriage, Ramsay seeks not only political power but symbolic power as well. By marrying the perceived heir to Winterfell, Ramsay solidifies his claim to the north, but more importantly, he asserts his dominance over the Starks, a family that represents everything Ramsay was denied, a legitimate, powerful name. Section 5. The role of fear. Fear is Ramsay's greatest weapon. He understands that fear can paralyze, and he wields it with surgical precision. His reputation as a monster precedes him, and he ensures that everyone who crosses his path knows exactly what he is capable of. This reputation is key to maintaining his power. In a world as volatile as Westeros, where alliances shift and betrayal is rampant, fear keeps Ramsay's enemies at bay. The psychological impact of fear is most evident in Theon's transformation. Theon is so terrified of Ramsay that he abandons his identity, willing to become Reek just to avoid further pain. This manipulation through fear shows Ramsay's deep understanding of human psychology. He knows that breaking a person's spirit is more effective than simply killing them. In many ways, Ramsay's use of fear is a commentary on power dynamics within Westeros itself, where fear often trumps loyalty or love. Section 6. Ramsay's relationship with Roose. Ramsay's relationship with his father, Ramsay Bolton, is fraught with tension. Roose is a cold, calculating man who sees his son as little more than a tool. Their interactions reveal a strained bond. Ramsay seeks approval, but Roose offers little more than indifference. This lack of paternal affection further warps Ramsay's perception of power and worth. He learns that to gain Roose's approval, he must be as ruthless as possible. The contrast between Roose and Ramsay is stark. While Roose is pragmatic and controlled in his cruelty, Ramsay is reckless and sadistic. This difference highlights Ramsay's desperate need for validation. He overcompensates, believing that his father will love him more if he outdoes him in brutality. But Roose's cold detachment only fuels Ramsay's insecurities, creating a vicious cycle of cruelty and rejection. Section 7. The influence of bastardry. Ramsay's bastard status is central to his character. In Westeros, bastards are treated as second-class citizens, constantly reminded of their illegitimacy. This societal rejection plays a significant role in shaping Ramsay's worldview. He is determined to prove that he is just as worthy, if not more so, than those born to noble families. This chip on his shoulder drives much of his cruelty and ambition. One of the pivotal moments in Ramsay's arc is his legitimization by King Tommen. While this act elevates Ramsay's status, it does little to soothe his insecurities. He still feels the need to prove himself, leading to ever-escalating acts of violence. This need to constantly validate his worth is a key driver in Ramsay's pursuit of power and cruelty, as he believes that only through fear and domination can he overcome the stigma of his birth. Section 8. The Games of Ramsay. Ramsay's sadistic games are infamous throughout the North. He delights in hunting down his victims, giving them a false sense of hope before inevitably capturing and flaying them alive. These games are a manifestation of Ramsay's need for control. By reducing his victims to prey, Ramsay asserts his dominance, ensuring that they are utterly powerless in the face of his cruelty. The game with Theon is perhaps the most disturbing. By pretending to be Theon's savior, Ramsay gives him a brief glimmer of hope before plunging him back into despair. This psychological torture is far more devastating than any physical pain, as it erodes Theon's sense of self. For Ramsay, these games are not just entertainment. They are a way to assert his superiority, to remind himself that he holds all the power. Section 9. Ramsay and the Stark Legacy. The Starks represent everything Ramsay is not: noble, honorable, and legitimate. His obsession with destroying them is a direct result of his own insecurities. By claiming Winterfell and taking on the Stark name through his marriage to Arya, Ramsay seeks to erase the legacy of the Starks and replace it with his own. This need to supplant the Starks is symbolic of Ramsay's desire to rewrite his own narrative, to go from a despised bastard to the ruler of the North. However, Ramsay's attempt to claim the Stark legacy is ultimately hollow. He may hold Winterfell, but he will never truly be a Stark. His cruelty alienates him from the Northern Lords, who remain loyal to the memory of the Starks. In his attempt to destroy the Stark name, Ramsay only solidifies the North's desire to see him overthrown, proving that power without respect is ultimately unsustainable. Section 10. Manipulation and Deception. Ramsay is not just a brute. He is also a master manipulator. His ability to deceive and manipulate those around him is a key aspect of his character. Whether it's convincing Theon to trust him or manipulating the Northern Lords into submission, Ramsay uses deceit as a weapon just as effectively as he uses violence. One of the most chilling examples of Ramsay's manipulation is his treatment of Jane Poole, whom he forces to masquerade as Arya Stark. Through this act, Ramsay not only deceives the Northern Lords but also psychologically torments Jane, forcing her to participate in the destruction of her own identity. This manipulation highlights Ramsay's understanding of power. It's not enough to simply dominate. He must control every aspect of his victims' lives, including their identities. Section 11. The Brutality of War. Ramsay's cruelty extends beyond individual acts of sadism. He is also a ruthless commander in battle. His scorched earth tactics, including the burning of villages and the flaying of prisoners, serve to instill fear in his enemies. Ramsay understands that war is as much about psychological warfare as it is about physical combat, and he uses terror to his advantage. However, Ramsay's brutality in war ultimately works against him. While he may win short-term victories through fear, his actions alienate potential allies and galvanize his enemies. This is most evident in the Battle of the Bastards, where Ramsay's cruelty motivates Jon Snow and the Northern Lords to unite against him. In the end, Ramsay's reliance on fear as a tool of war proves to be his undoing. Section 12. The Limits of Fear. While fear is a powerful weapon, it has its limits. Ramsay's rule is built on terror, but terror alone is not enough to maintain power. As the Northern Lords begin to rally around Jon Snow, we see the cracks in Ramsay's empire. His inability to inspire loyalty means that his hold on the North is fragile, dependent entirely on his ability to instill fear. This reliance on fear is ultimately Ramsay's downfall. In the Battle of the Bastards, Jon Snow's leadership, built on loyalty and honor, proves more enduring than Ramsay's reign of terror. Ramsay's defeat is a testament to the idea that power built on cruelty is ultimately unsustainable. The Northern Lords, weary of Ramsay's brutality, eagerly abandon him at the first opportunity, proving that fear can only take a ruler so far. Section 13. Ramsay's Downfall. Ramsay's defeat at the Battle of the Bastards is not just a military loss. It is the culmination of his entire character arc. His reliance on fear, cruelty, and manipulation ultimately leads to his undoing. In the end, Ramsay is not defeated by a more brutal force, but by one built on loyalty, honor, and love. Jon Snow, Sansa Stark, and the Northern Lords represent everything Ramsay is not, and it is their unity that brings about his downfall. Ramsay's death, fittingly at the hands of his own hounds, is a poetic end to his reign of terror. The very tools he used to instill fear, his dogs, his games, his cruelty, turn against him in the end. This moment symbolizes the ultimate failure of Ramsay's worldview. Power built on fear is fleeting, and those who rely on cruelty will eventually be consumed by it. Section 14. Ramsay's Legacy. Ramsay's legacy in A Song of Ice and Fire is one of destruction and fear. He leaves behind a trail of broken lives, ruined families, and shattered hopes. Yet, despite his horrific acts, Ramsay is not without complexity. His cruelty is born of deep insecurity, a need to prove himself in a world that has rejected him. In many ways, Ramsay is a product of the society he inhabits, a world where power is often won through violence and where the strong prey on the weak. But Ramsay's story also serves as a cautionary tale. His reign of terror may bring him temporary power, but it ultimately leads to his destruction. Ramsay's downfall is a reminder that cruelty, while effective in the short term, cannot sustain lasting power. In the end, it is loyalty, honor, and love that triumph, leaving Ramsay's legacy as a dark chapter in the history of Westeros. Section 15. Conclusion. Ramsay Bolton's evil is not just a product of his actions, but of the psychological, societal, and familial forces that shape him. He is a man consumed by his insecurities, driven by a need to prove his worth in a world that sees him as illegitimate. His cruelty, while shocking, is deeply rooted in his desire for power and validation. Yet, as we have seen, power built on fear is fragile, and Ramsay's reliance on terror ultimately leads to his downfall. In the end, Ramsay Bolton serves as a stark reminder of the limits of cruelty. His story challenges us to consider the nature of power, the consequences of fear, and the enduring strength of loyalty and love. While Ramsay may have been a master of manipulation and fear, it is those very traits that lead to his ultimate demise. And as we reflect on his journey, we are left to ponder the broader themes of A Song of Ice and Fire, the nature of evil, the fragility of power, and the enduring question of what it means to rule.